I'm going to kind of kick things off now. I think basically we're gonna talk today about lifelong learning and the importance of it. And one of the people in the comments on one of the groups also said, how can we maintain lifelong learning, which is a key part of what the Freethinker Institute is all about, is creating a community of lifelong learners. So this is kind of a near and dear topic to me. We'll just kind of have like a conversation between Dr. Mehta. I think you prefer Krishnesh, right?
Whichever way.
Okay, we'll go with Dr. Mehta to stay formal, if you don't mind, and unless you ask me not to, that's what I'm going to go with by default. And Himanshu and I will all kind of share perspectives on lifelong learning. And with that said, I don't know if either let me check. I did forget to lock down the this chat. So give me 1 second. I don't want screen shares. I don't want people to be able to rename themselves.
Hard day.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I don't want people to be able to share whiteboards. And so so Betsy, you had some background noise, so I muted you. If that was accidental, you're on mute now. So with that said, I want to let Himanshu and Dr. Mehta sort of kick off and sort of their perspectives on why lifelong learning is important. And we can talk about, you can each kind of bring up the topics of interest to you around lifelong learning. And I mentioned one that a listener or like a reader on one of the meetups asked is also, how do we maintain lifelong learning? But do either one of you want to go first in terms of, and also in terms of the format? We're going to have kind of a panel discussion where we'll kind of all, the three of us will kind of talk back and forth, and maybe we'll each give our perspective and then have back and forth conversation, but then we'll also have questions from the audience. And so maybe though, the way we typically do this is when each of us presents a perspective, try to limit the questions to like clarify, understanding and clarification on the perspective. And then, after that, we'll kind of go back and forth answering questions from the audience after we've each kind of presented a perspective on lifelong learning. Does that sound like it works for you guys, Himanshu and Dr. Mehta?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So do either one of you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I think we can, if you look at the whole evolution that has happened for humans, millions of years ago, it is said there were about 11 species of humans, and then one, Homo sapiens, progressed further and it has evolved. And we are constantly evolving, and it's not just the body, but it's the intelligence that we possess. And what drives the intelligence is our mind. And it's the mind that separates us from everybody else, how we think, and based on how we think, we act. So lifelong learning is important for our evolution. Everybody is not the same. There is some people are more intelligent, some people do more than others, some people know more than others, some people have better insight, some people have better intuition, some people can look into the future, some people have better memory. So that is all different facets of evolution of the humankind. And by being a constant learner, we are basically exercising our muscles of both the brain and the mind. So I would pause here and maybe that's just a starting point of the conversation, but I would love to hear Dr. Krishnesh, Mehta's, and Garrett's thoughts on this.
Dr. Mehta, do you want to kind of reflect on that or share
If
your
you
own?
want to go first, I will in
Yeah,
the
you
time
are.
figure out. Yeah. Hello, Garrett, you can go first.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. So I guess for me, like, lifelong learning is I presented my perspective on sort of the meaning of life on another event. And for me, lifelong learning is the meaning of life. It's to learn and be the best version of ourselves. And so I think learning is really helpful in a lot of ways. It helps in increasing knowledge as well as wisdom. Knowledge helps us understand the physical world that we live in, and wisdom helps us understand how to increase happiness and decrease harm in the world. And so the more that we learn, the more we are able to understand and navigate the physical world and understand how we can increase happiness and decrease harm for the people we can influence, which I'd argue is a really good thing to go after. It just makes those that we can influence happier and help them suffer less. And so, lifelong learning increases our sphere of influence so we can do more of all of those things. The other thing is, as far as like, how do we embrace lifelong learning? I think that's a matter of, that was a question that was asked by one of the folks in one of the meetups that we advertised to. And basically, for me, that's about staying humble. There's a good book called, I think it's something like Humility is the New Smart or something like that, that talks about the only way that we can continue to learn is by staying humble and acknowledging what we don't know. And by acknowledging what we don't know and listening with an open mind towards new ideas that help us grow, that's how we learn new truths that help us increase our sphere of influence and our ability to navigate the physical world, as well as the world of wisdom, which is, for me, again, increasing happiness and decreasing harm, as well as seeing the truth clearly. So that's kind of my take, but Dr. Mehta, you want to share yours or any comments on what me or Himanshu said?
Okay, so I will just add one more thing. So I will bring in the brain perspective. Our brains, actually, every time we learn new things, develop more neural connections. And that is what just 1 minute, I'm shifting over to my laptop. Am I audible?
I think it's this RF person.
No, it's Krishna Mehta seems, so perhaps doctor's got two devices going or something, because it seems to be feedback.
Krishnesh, if you
1 minute. I'm just shifting.
I muted the what I think was your phone. I hope was your phone. Try talking again, Krishnesh.
Yeah.
Oh no, I may have muted, like, I think I might have muted your laptop, sorry. But you need to mute one or it's gonna echo like that. There we go. Now I'll ask to unmute.
Hello, am I audible now?
You
Yes,
are
yeah.
audible, but we can't see you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, at least till I figure out that, I'll keep talking. Otherwise, yeah. Okay, fine. So now you can see me. Yeah.
Yep. Now we can see you.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we learn, our brains develop newer connections. So when we are born with minimal connections, and as we learn, we grow more and more connections. And in our brains, neurons that are not connected die. So actually, after age of 21 or 22, we all start losing neurons at the rate of around 15 to 85,000 neurons per day. So the whole idea is that we should learn every day. If we don't learn, our brain starts losing connections or only uses those connections which are things that we do regularly. For example, if you're a taxi driver, as they've studied taxi drivers in London, then the area of space in the brain, that is what gets connected, and the rest of it starts getting atrophied or reduced. So brain gives more space to the areas where new learning is happening. So even from the brain point of view, it is very important that we keep learning. We create newer connections in our brain. And another very important thing is our brains thrive on curiosity or surprise. So if it stops getting surprise, or if it stops getting newer things, again, it starts losing connections. So both ways, it is important that we do learning, or we keep learning all the time. For now, I'm just presenting this point, and then we can take it further.
And Ocean has a question. If we could take your question, Ocean.
Yes.
Ocean, are you there? Hope you have a bad connection.
I'm not able to hear.
Yeah, we can't hear you well, Ocean.
Yeah. I can, yeah. Can you define, okay, maybe I'm in a bad area. Is it better now?
That's better.
Is it better?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, better.
Okay. Can you please define what the, I mean, so, okay, so let's say, you know, I'm 52, but let's say I'm 75 years old and I'm losing a lot of brain cells according to your theory. And so I try to learn. How do you define learning? What do I have to do specifically?
This question is to me.
I think so.
Yeah, or anybody who is interested to answer my question. So what I'm in my theory. Oh, okay, maybe you can counter my argument. So even if you're not reading a book, you can still learn. I mean, there are infinite variety of activities, even just focusing on your breath, you know, like as in the meditation in Buddhism, you know, I think you can activate your neurons, specific neurons. And so and people reading a lot of newspapers daily years old. I have many friends who are elderly people, 70 or 80 or 90, but I'm not sure they're any wiser than when they were like 35 years old. You know, I'm sure they're reading a lot of newspapers and, you know, learning things, but I don't think they're getting any wiser. I mean, maybe it's my prejudice or not, but so how do you define learning? Give us a specific example of learning in this context you're talking about.
Okay. Should I go for? Should I go?
Yeah, go
Garrett
ahead, Dr.
and-
Mehta, and I'll comment after you're done. Or if Himanshu wants to go, he can go before me too. But I have a comment after you're done.
Yeah. So from the brain point of view, learning means anything that allows more neural connections. Reading newspapers and all that, if they are routine, they would not make newer connections. For example, if I'm into political reading, or I'm into sports reading, or whatever it is, when I'm doing a similar thing, then there is less requirement of, unless of course there'll be very little new things happening, but routinized things don't constitute learning. So when you're learning, you are learning things which are new, if I make sense, right? And wisdom is a different thing altogether, right? Just because I'm learning, so I'm getting information, does not necessarily mean that I know how to use that information, where to apply it properly. So
yeah, but
there's a difference.
Beethoven. Yeah, Beethoven's symphony 10 million times, that 1,000 times, million times, 100 million times. Each time I learned something new. You know, listening to the same music over and over again, or reading a Shakespeare, or reading the Bible. So how, so even though it's the same, exact same routine for doing for 75 years, you may still discover something new. That's that considered? Is it considered learning or what?
So even in Bible, suppose you're reading Bible, right? So every chapter or everything has something new in it, right? So that is new. As long as there is something.
You're reading the exact same words. Like a few minutes ago, you said that some people are reading a newspaper and political things and sports, and people don't get. We're on the same page. People don't get wiser. However, like reading the Bible or listening to the Beethoven Symphony 10 million times, each time you discover, if you're a good educated listener, you learn something, revelation, something new every time, even though if you listen to the exact same music.
Yes, but so let me put it this way. So if I'm
Hi,
reading
everyone.
Bible.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Ellis. I should have came on a bit earlier. Tonight is a panel discussion. So let's get through the presentation first. And then afterwards, Garrett will let us know when the question and answer period is starting. Thank you so much, everyone.
Alice, I think we might have actually done that, unless Dr. Mehta and Himanshu, did you guys have more in the presentation portion that you wanted to say, or are you ready to go on to conversation?
I think let Dr. Krishnesh answer this question, and then maybe we can have a Q&A session between us, so that it's more like a fireside chat, and then we open it up.
Sure,
for
that sounds good.
Yeah. So when we are talking, so example, if I'm reading Bible, right? So or I'm listening to music, okay, Beethoven Symphony, whatever. If I am learning new things every time I'm listening to it, because I'm registering something which was not registered earlier, yes, I'm learning, but I'm learning within the same category. So the brain circuits only of music gets activated. When I say learning, I'm talking of across the circuits, across the categories learning, which is what will keep our whole brain connected and active. I hope you get the difference. If I'm reading Bible also, yes, but then it will only activate those areas of the brain which are connected to the aspects covered in the Bible. Right. So I would not. So for example, when I'm reading Bible, I would not be activating those circuits that are connected to, say, black holes or something like that.
I guess, Dr. Mehta, like if you read the same verse of the Bible multiple times, but you create new insights that
you create new insights. You create new insights. You're learning
activities. Stop playing the go. Stop. Yeah, like
I'm not able to hear properly.
Ocean, are you able to type in your question in chat?
I can.
Yes, that may be easier, and I can ask it.
I'm curious to hear your answer, Dr. Mehta, to what I said, like whether or not, if you're reading the same thing over and over again, but you're creating new insights from it, would you consider that learning from a neural connection perspective?
Yes. But it will be within that category. Unless you're getting an insight which is connected to some other category. So see, for example, if my brain is more cross-connected, so when I think of words, I may be making newer connections connected to other things because of my cross-learning that I've done before, or what it ignites in me. So then it works. I hope I'm making it clear.
Yeah, that there are different types of insights and
yes. So what it activates, so it can, so for example, when I'm reading a Bible, it can activate black hole thought also probably. Then yes, I'm making a cross connection, I'm making a new learning, a new circuit.
Right.
Okay. Anyways, I think before we get into complicated things, I just wanted to say that even from brain point of view, the more new things you learn. And what today's brain science says, that you should learn at least 2 new things every day to keep our brains healthier and robust.
Yeah, and one of the ways that I sort of keep myself accountable to that is I keep a Stoic journal and I write down, a number of categories, but one of the things I write down is the things that I learned for the day. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I have 2 things every day that are, 2 totally new things that I learned each day, but I'm sure that I am learning more than 2 new things, but I don't always write 2 down in my journal, but at least that gives me a reminder at the end of the day to sort of take account of how much am I learning for the day, as well as like, what can I learn from my experiences of the day, and things that I appreciate about the day, and a number of other sorts of, reminders. So I think, that's something that I can recommend for people. And I don't know how much or Dr. Mehta, if you guys have some paradigm like that you use to like keep track of what you've learned over a regular time period.
Yeah. So let me add, some other thought, a parallel thought to this. It is said, that the learning actually starts in the womb. So a baby starts learning in the womb. So baby's senses are active. The baby hears what's outside being said, the vibrations, the temperature, everything. There is certain kind of learning that happens in the womb. And until the age of 25, learning is mostly active and passive. So there is a certain kind of passive learning, which means you're not actively seeking learning, but from within the environment, you are absorbing things. If you look at a baby is like a sponge. Baby is very curious. Baby is very observant. A toddler too, at that age, that curiosity drives learning. However, after the age of 25 or so, the circuits are well set, the frontal cortex is fully developed. So the learning from that point on, and probably as Dr. Krishna said, the neural circuits start to decline if you don't work on them. The learning is mostly active learning, which means you have to seek thoughts, ideas, concepts that you want to learn and ponder on them, memorize them. The memory also is not that sharp. So it is more important to keep this learning alive beyond the age of 25 if somebody is interested in improving themselves and becoming a better version of themselves.
Yeah, and actually, Krishnesh, when you say learning begins in the womb, it reminds me of the event, I think it was last week, where we talked about abortion. And one of the things that I mentioned is that the first memories form in the 3rd trimester. So it's really the 3rd trimester where an unborn baby or a fetus, I forget like exactly when the term changes, but in the 3rd trimester is when memories start to form, and then there is learning, and there's sort of signs of sentience. And I would argue that, we all know, like as children, it's super easy to learn new things, and learning kind of comes very naturally. And, teaching a young child a new language comes really quickly. Whereas, once you've matured and your brain is a little less dynamic, the learning is slower and it takes more effort. But I would argue that effort is very much worth it, because, as you get older, you usually have more influence, and the more you learn, the more positively you can wield the influence that you have. And so I would argue that while it takes more influence to learn as you get older, it's very much worth it, and something that we should all be putting effort into. And, half of the world roughly believes in rebirth. And if rebirth is true, there might even be learning that lasts past this life. And if there is, then your learning is never going to waste, let alone, not just in this life, but beyond it. And so I don't know, Himanshu or Krishnesh, if either of you have comments on any of that.
There could be some truth to it, definitely, Garrett. It cannot be proven scientifically whether the learning carries on, or whether the afterbirth is possible. But one thing that I would want to add about continuous learning is something that the famous James Clear book Atomic Habits talks about, the power of compound interest. So every day you learn, at the end of the year, if you're learning something every day, you basically are 38 times better than who you were before the start of the year, or 38.5, whatever that number is. So, just by the fact that you are learning something every day, there is this evolution of the mind, evolution of intellect. You just become better every day. And becoming better is not just about accumulating knowledge, reading more books. It is all about confidence. It is about becoming efficient. It is about being successful in the world. It is also about becoming happy from within, because when you know that you are growing, the fact that growth, the fact that you're growing gives you inner happiness. Any kind of change in the self for the better gives you happiness, whether you are trying to lose weight, whether you are trying to change your lifestyle, whether you are trying to get rid of your addiction. Slowly, every day you make progress, and that progression gives you happiness.
Can I chime in,
There's
Jared?
some
Can I-
questions. Yes. Yeah. The two questions.
Betsy is actually right before you, Ocean. So let's let Betsy ask her question, and then we'll get to you, Ocean.
Yes, my question is the following. Does it make a difference what kind of medium you learn? For example, like I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and audiobooks are different from like physical books that you're reading, because you're exercising your auditory part of your brain. Does that make a difference, the medium, if it's visual or if it's audio, or different types of activation of different parts of the brain? That's my first question. And my second question is about, it seems to me that from what I gather, that IQ is kind of fixed, but there's emotional intelligence that can be accumulated over time. Is there a type of learning that it's cumulative and one that is kind of fixed?
Dr. Mehta, do you want to take a
Yes.
crack
Okay.
at that?
So,
And then-
yeah,
All
good
right.
question. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, whenever we are listening, especially if it's an audiobook, it becomes a little like passive reading. Okay, because for example, right now when I'm talking, it is still audio, but I'm not going continuous. So there's time to reflect and think while you are listening. If that happens while reading, while listening to an audiobook, yes. But if it becomes passive, like TV watching or something, which is a possibility, then the learning is not as good as reading the same text. I hope you get the difference. The second part, which you mentioned, can you just clarify, because I missed it? So
She was saying
I think,
like IQ seems to be fixed, but emotional intelligence is
yes.
varied.
Okay, so yes. No, so that I would like to say that there's not just IQ, there is IQ, EQ, and SQ. But learning need not just happen by information. So let me put that very clearly. You can also learn experientially, in the sense that newer experiences, for example, going into a new space, smelling a new smell, experiencing a new touch, all these things also lead to learning. So it's not just information-based learning that we're talking of here, right? So emotions also, therefore getting emotional experiences, getting spiritual experiences, all these things also add to learning. Whenever you experience something that is not experienced before, adds to a learning, or would be considered as learning. I hope that is clear. So yes, EQ also, but see, where EQ, how do we learn EQ? So most of our EQ is learned when we interact with people. The more people we interact with while we are young, so 0 to 8 years of age, makes us that much more EQ wise better.
Because
Think-
there was a study that said that reading like fiction, because you read about other people that are different from you, increases your emotional intelligence and compassion, because you have to relate to other people that are different from you.
Yeah, so precisely, yes. So what is emotional intelligence? When you can tolerate and adjust and accept people other than you, okay, and deal with the different emotions. So that is why the more people you meet, the more wider type of experiential readings you do, the more kind of near cultures that you get exposed to, the more different kinds of people and personalities you connect to. All these things are going to add to your emotional intelligence.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because even though I'm asking a question, I may be one of the people here who's getting the most out of everything you're saying by reading between your lines. So I want to thank you for that. But that's a great irony. But yeah, so it's kind of tricky. Okay, you were on the same page that even though we're doing the exact same activities, we can still learn new insight, like or reading the book or just focusing on breath, like as in this Buddhist meditation practice, or listen to Beethoven's music. Same music for 10,000 times, you learn every time. But I totally agree. It's extremely important and healthy to give a stimulus, different stimulus to. Again, I'm a kind of practical person who wants a practical example. When you say just learning, and I used to have a roommate and landlord, and he can tell 99.99% the quiz at television, quiz. And for me, it's kind of frivolous, but he thinks that's a great learning. It's all the facts of who was the actor for this movie, and 1968, who is this baseball player. And for me, it's not important, but in his mind, he's learning something new every single day, and so would you consider that important learning every single day to keep your brain healthy?
Ocean, can you type the last part? I couldn't hear you well.
Did you hear?
Or repeat, I couldn't hear the last part.
So maybe
No.
I can.
So So when you're watching the TV programs, like a quiz, it's like when you're watching watching a TV around 7 p.m. There are lots of quiz programs. They'll tell you who's the most famous actors in 1965 or whatever. And my roommate used to know everything because he's constantly learning something new every single day by watching endlessly of those quiz TV programs, which I think it's kind of frivolous for me. It's not interesting to me. I'd rather listen to music of the Beethoven or Bach or Mozart or John Coltrane or Charlie Parker, But you think people who believes that watching 8 hours a day in front of the TV and because watching those quiz programs or anything that they think they're stimulating the brain by learning anything new, something new every single day.
Yeah, so it depends. So technically what is mentioned is when you're doing any passive observations. For example, when you're watching TV, if you're watching a serial or something, you're just taking in. There's no reflection, no interaction happening. But for example, you're watching a quiz program on TV, or if you're watching a Discovery Channel on TV, okay, where you are learning new things. Or even if you're watching the same thing, say for example, if I'm watching a serial or a movie, there if I'm looking at the actors, how they're acting, their facial expressions, then of course I'm learning. So it also depends on how I'm looking at TV. or how am I taking in what I'm seeing or what I'm experiencing. That would also, so it is not just that TV is not making you learn, or it is, but most of TV is passive, and as long as it is passive, then it's not going to learn. I hope that is clear.
So if I may
Yeah,
add,
well, I think it might be, and let me finish. So I think that, instead of the abstract discussion, which is wonderful, but maybe the most important thing is, if it's possible, I know it's not possible, but if it's possible, just opening up the people who are considered genius, like Einstein or Beethoven, and how they actually maintained their high IQs in the brains, and did they really, was Einstein trying to learn anything new every single day, or simply seeking to get the answer for the same problem for 10, 20 years. It's what do you think?
So let's take Einstein for example. So while we think that he was doing only physics, but he was learning maths. So he did not know what is called the Riemannian geometry. So he went and he studied other things. So while we think he was working only on one question, he was also connecting a lot of things. That's how he came to this general theory of relativity, photoelectric effect. All these things are doing different things. So
I agree. I
yeah.
totally agree. And he was a concert level violinist. He's a
Yeah.
professional
And he was
level
a
violinist.
he was a so
Yeah,
you'll find that
you can
people
Google
were,
you can Google Einstein. You can Google actually Einstein playing Mozart violin sonatas.
yes,
It's
yes. He was I think used to
professional level.
play.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I totally agree.
And
Let's say-
another thing is, you'll find, just 1 minute.
Yeah.
I think one thing you'll also find is people who fall in that category of genius. I mean, that's a question mark, who is genius? But if you take Einstein or any such people, most of these people would have multiple interests, multiple hobbies, if I want to call it. Okay, which means that they were cross learning also across the hobbies. So for example, while playing violin, you might be thinking of science, and while doing science, you might be thinking of music and all that. So there's a cross learning also which happens, and which is also what activates your brain that much more.
Let's let the next person ask their questions after Himanshu and I chime in on that. So go ahead, Himanshu, and then I'll put my 2 cents in, and then we'll let
I
Joseph.
think there are more people asking questions.
Yeah, we will get to it,
I
but I'm gonna let
totally
Himanshu
agree.
to say something. So
sure. So based on the question that was asked, I feel that it's not just getting exposed to knowledge that makes you learn, because the measure of learning is how much you are able to retain. The retention of what you see, what you hear, what you read is also very important. And being actively participating in the learning process is more important than just passively observing the events or the experiences happening around you. And secondly, the learning is different types of learning. What we are referring to as learning in this talk so far loosely is based on our experiences of our sense organs. We are seeing something and we are learning. We are touching something, we are learning. We are reading something with the eyes, we are learning. We are hearing some audiobook and we are learning. So all these sense organ-based learning is very personal in nature. It's very private. It could be true or it could be false. There is no way to validate those. It's something that we own as an experience in our memory. The higher level of learning is basically, I would say, intelligence-based learning, which is more community-based, which means you are learning, and what you are learning, other people have the same point of view. It's not just your point of view or your opinion. It's an opinion that has been shared by multiple people. So now you have an opportunity to discuss your opinion, validate your opinion, evolve, change, junk your opinion, so that knowledge becomes more refined, because now it has gone through the test of other people. So when you in a classroom, when you read, you talk about it, you discuss, what we are doing over here, anything, any idea, any thought has been now debated between us. So that knowledge is much higher level knowledge. And that is what makes you intelligent, because now you can critically evaluate your opinion. However, this is still very material knowledge, because it is accumulated from the books. It is debated in the brain and mind, whatever you want to refer it. And it's basically mental acrobatics. The higher level knowledge than this is intuition. And intuition goes into multiple layers of intuition, and it's unfathomable, not measurable. It can go to any length. And this is what knowledge or learning should help us uncover. And intuition, it's very difficult to pinpoint the definition of intuition. Many people have said different things about intuition. Intuition is your gut feel. It tells you, don't take this way, take this way. Don't turn right, turn left. Intuition is saying, don't sign on this dotted line. Think about it again. That's your intuition. That's your gut feel. We sometimes get it. We sometimes don't get it. Sometimes we feel something from within, but it turns out to be wrong. We listen to our gut feel, and it wasn't a gut feel, which means gut feel can also be wrong. So how do we make it the right gut feel? Is the question. There are techniques to do it, and we can talk about it. But what I'm trying to talk about is this concept of being with oneself. So the real knowledge comes when we are with ourselves. So first you gain the knowledge, then you reflect on it, then you be with your own self to gain the intuition. For example, if you are brushing teeth every morning, it's a routine ritual. Or you're taking a shower, it's a routine ritual. So at that point of time, you're not really thinking much. You are just doing the action. You are in the moment. You are in the present moment. There is no past, there is no future. You're just there and enjoying that moment. In that moment, you might have experienced a lot of intuitive thoughts come. So that's when you are at that, you are with yourself. The other moment in life would be probably when you wake up. The first thing that happens to you is you have a very innocent mind. So that innocent mind, as soon as you wake up, before you get exposed to the cruel world and the calculated world around us, also allows for intuition to grow. So knowledge comes by changing the mindset, by being open, and not just by reading books, but also shifting the mindset to absorb and retain more information. And to make use of that information, because information is just like data. You need data to gain insights, and you insights to gain further, to create action.
So I want to add a couple of comments about things that were mentioned. One was about modalities of learning audio or visual styles. And most people have a preferred methodology. And so I highly recommend everyone consider whether they learn better through audio or visual, and consider using that modality more often, because it'll help you learn more effectively. The other thing is, it's been talked about memorizing facts. I'm going to make the bold argument that memorizing random facts is not really learning with a positive result. If you want to learn with a positive result, learn things that actually will help you increase happiness and decrease harm in the world. And there are many direct and indirect ways of doing that. But generally, like, having some, beneficial purpose of learning can be very motivational, and I think long-term increases the happiness of the people you can influence, and so is more beneficial than just randomly memorizing, pi to the 20th degree. All right, maybe it's impressive, but like, you haven't really added value to anyone's life by learning that many digits of pi. So that said, I want to let Joseph ask his question.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening and holding this meetup. I look at learning, on a number of different levels. I look at it on the physical level, creating new neural pathways. I look at it on the personal curiosity and personal satisfaction level, that you're actually satisfying your own personal curiosity and learning about the world and learning how to be a better person. And there's a moral sense where you're searching for truth. So those are three areas. But the one I'm actually very much interested in is the physical aspect of it. And that's the neuroplasticity of it. And I had read about a neuroscientist who had actually given a TED talk as well regarding the biomarkers. There are certain biomarkers that allow her to create strategies for learning that in patients that have had a stroke, so that they're able to actually come up with a specific learning plan, an ideal kind of personalized learning plan in order to help rejuvenate different parts of the brain. Are you familiar with any kinds of those studies, or how that would actually work? And is it possible to replicate in, I guess, in other patients that may not have physical damage, but may have psychological damage?
Krishnesh, do you want to answer?
Yeah, you're the best guy to answer that, Dr. Mehta. I'll
Yeah.
cede to
Okay.
you.
So there are studies which. So I'll give you an example. So there are studies. So people, dementia, right? So dementia is a memory loss problem, or right? All of you know that dementia.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah. So what they did is, so they took this group of people and they did three things. So they were divided into three groups. I think it's a study done in UK. So one group was made to do jogging every day. The other group was made to, I think, take some medication or something like that. And the third group was told to go to a art studio and make nude paintings basically in 3D. So of these three, which group do you think benefited the most?
If it were dementia?
Yeah, dementia.
Physical.
The jogging one.
Yes.
Yeah. But no matter how unintuitive it may sound, actually the third group, which was actually painting, was benefited the most.
Interesting.
Okay. So the reason is, in jogging, you are doing jogging, but you're not doing anything new for the brain. There's no new learning happening. Here, these people were, I forgot to tell you, they were all 60 years of age. So at 60 years of age, when they start learning art, they start painting, or they start to draw, they're learning a new skill, which is why it is said from the brain point of view, the more new skills you learn, the more new hobbies you develop and all that increases your brain learning. Okay, I'm at the physical level only. Of course, I'm not getting into spiritual and other things. Somebody mentioned meditation and how, because if you understand how meditation works, it makes neural connections of a very different kind, which normal physical learning may not do, but I'll not go there right now unless people have questions. But I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
So yeah.
So maybe I can just add a little bit about neuroplasticity that you asked. There are certain protocols that could help common people like us as well, and not just dementia patient. And one of the things that people typically talk about is becoming alert and becoming aware. And becoming alert help us be more focused, and becoming alert and focus also help us be more motivated to learn. So
Himanshu,
yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were finished.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No, what I just wanted to add is that when I say that this worked for dementia people, means even it will work for normal people. I just wanted to clarify that it's not that it will only work on dementia. Sorry.
So Dr. Krishnesh, are you suggesting that we develop diverse hobbies and
Yes.
also what about our profession? Because our profession takes, the majority of the day, and that could sometimes be a monotonous job. So how do we improve our brain if we are doing a monotonous job?
See, that is precisely what I'm saying, that when we get into a monotonous work, for example, if I'm a taxi driver, I'm driving taxis all day long, then my only what is called the space area or the map area of the brain gets developed, and which develops increases more. So the so-called the real estate given in the brain to that space area is more than any normal person. But at the cost of other areas in the brain, right? So this space is taken from other spaces and given to this. So whenever we are doing anything monotonous, for example, if we are doing only commerce, or if you're doing only, say, heart surgeries, we are a medical doctor, or if you are doing just physics, if you are doing only one thing, you're going deeper only in one thing. So whatever new things are happening is growing within that circuits, within those areas. It is not across the brain. If you want to develop and keep your brain healthy, you need to have cross connections against categories, against different thought processes, which means that you should be open to all learning, all different types of learning, and not just, as I told you, language based or informational, but it can be experiential, it can be observational, it can be sensory, it can be all types, even spiritual, if you want to call it, in the sense that you get new in spiritual experiences. All these things, the more diverse they are, brain needs diversity for it to remain robust and use the whole brain. Okay, so diversity is very important in the brain, and that is why you see that once people who get into profession and get stuck in the profession, these are the people who get more chances of getting Alzheimer's as they grow old and all that. If they stop learning across the disciplines or don't have hobbies across disciplines or something, then they are the ones who are more prone to dementia or Alzheimer's kind of things.
Great. Should we let Matthew ask his question?
Sure, thanks. So I'm thinking about what Krishna said about having different interests, and also in general. When I was younger, I learned a lot of different things about a lot of different subjects, and then like I've learned 3 computer languages in the past 5 years, and now my attitude is like, yeah, I there's more to learn, but it's fine. I don't need to learn it. So is there such a thing as too much learning? And how do you balance learning with mastery? Because there's an opportunity cost for learning. If I'm spending time learning, then I'm not spending time using the skills that I already have.
Who wants to answer?
So I'll take a stab at that. First of all, I don't think there is such a thing as too much learning, other than like the example that I said, where you're learning something that doesn't add any value. Learning 50 digits of pi, I'd argue that's too much learning, right? Too many digits of pi, not useful to anyone, not even to yourself, nor anyone else that you know. So there is useful learning and not useful learning. If we talk about useful learning, then I don't think there is too much. And then as far as how you balance time with mastery, I think becoming an expert at a diverse set of 4 or 5 or something like that, I don't want to say a specific number, but I just did, of topics, and becoming really well versed in them, and then being able to dabble in a number of others is like a good way of balancing, because I do think there's a lot of benefit of being obtaining mastery in a bunch of areas. And it was mentioned earlier that a lot of really famous scientists like had a lot of hobbies and stuff, and I think they did a study of like people with Nobel Prizes, and they found that the vast majority of people with Nobel Prizes were actually experts at multiple subjects, not just the field that they were in, but also piano or something else. And so really being a master at multiple things helps you cross-pollinate in knowledge and wisdom. So that would be my take, but I'm curious, Dr. Mehta and Himanshu, if you guys have other things you wanted to add.
Yeah, what I would add to what Garrett just said is having this cross-pollination between different subject areas and different ideas of other people help you become more creative. And creativity drives innovation, creativity drives leadership, creativity drives success and inner joy as well. The more creative you are, you're going to be more passionate in whatever work you're doing. So and then the other concept that I want to talk about is we have this conscious and unconscious mind, and the conscious mind is very, very little compared to what we have in the unconscious mind. So a lot of what we learn could get stored in the unconscious mind that we can draw upon whenever we need to. So nothing really goes waste. It is just a matter of time when you would need something and then something just comes up to you. You may have read that and it's on a memory. You may have read something 10 years ago, but you might be talking to somebody and suddenly something clicks, something comes to your mind, and all that is coming from your unconscious. So so I would say nothing ever goes waste.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. So, we receive around 11 million bits of information every second, of which we are only aware of 45 to 54 or 45 to 70, let's say, bits of information per second, only that much. Okay, that means almost 99% goes into your subconscious or unconscious. Having said that, so we were talking of learning in the womb. So it is said that every experience right from conception onwards is actually registered. It's just that we don't know how to access it. There are ways of accessing, but I don't want to get there, but we can access it. In other words, we have conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. Okay, so we are getting experiences whether we like it or not. But the point is, conscious learning is what we are talking of. That is more important for activating better connections in our brain. And another important thing is our brain, the universe, there are 10 raised to 89 particles. If I take the entire universe that we know of in science, it has 10 raised to 89 particles. But our brains can make 10 raised to 1 million connections. You understand the complexity? Okay. And then now you understand that there is nothing like too much learning, because our brains are capable of infinite possibilities. And 10 raised to 1 million connection, imagine what number that gets to, right? And you can imagine also how much we might be making. That's a different story, right? So there is nothing like too much for the brain. Having said that, and somebody also mentioned on the chat that as long as we are learning something that interests you, the point is, if you're only focusing only on what interests you, then again, you're falling in the same category, same format. So you should actually do it across interests, or whether you like it or not, in that sense. Yes, you will focus more on what you interest. Even getting exposed to things that don't interest you will also help your brain grow that much better. I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah, I just want to bring up something that was mentioned in the chat, which is about applied learning. And I want to mention that, one of the purposes of the Freethinker Institute is to help us all apply learning in our lives. And so we're actually working on a membership process for people who want to have accountability partners and on a regular basis stay in touch with people who help apply wisdom into our lives. So anyone interested in that, I'll drop my email in the chat and reach out to me, and we can talk about putting you into that process so that you can really focus on applying knowledge and wisdom into your daily life if you're interested in that sort of pursuit. With that said, I want to let Jack, if Himanshu and Dr.
Garrett, I would add one more thing, because
Yeah,
I think a lot of questions are coming on that. So
yeah,
what is a learning? So let me put it this way. So, and there's a question of applied learning and all that. So I'll just clarify what I mean when we say learning. So learning technically is a 4-step process. So let's take car driving, right? So in the first place, when I start learning to drive a car, I don't know what I don't know. Okay, so there is something called unconscious unknown. Okay, then I start learning. As I start driving a car, I know that this is the accelerator, this is the brake, this is the gear, and so on and so forth. So I still don't know them. I'm still not able to drive properly. So, but it is now unknown. My unknowns become conscious. So it is called the next step. It is conscious unknown. Then as I learn more, I now have to be conscious. So I know this is this. So when you might have learned your car, you would have experienced that when you are in this stage, you cannot talk to each other while driving. You have to focus continuously on the car. So that is what is called the third conscious known. So now you know everything, but it is conscious. You have to attend to that all the time. And once you cross that stage, then it becomes what is called unconscious known. That means now it is automatic. Now we can talk and listen to music and do 100 things and still drive the car. So any learning process goes through these 4 steps: unconscious unknown to unconscious known. Now, both these are stages. So when you're unconscious unknown, it is blissful state because there is no effort. When it becomes unconscious known, it is a blissful state because there is again no effort. It's the middle 2 stages which take a lot of effort, and which is where a lot of us give up learning a new thing and all that. I can't do it and so on. Okay, so this is very important. And then any learning is a 5-step process. So first I get exposed to something, right? So I hear about it, or I see it, or experience it. So the first step is exposure. The next step is, once I get exposed to it, I reflect on it, what I saw, what I learned, so that is exposure. Then I reflect on it. Then I intellectualize. So I have an intellectual understanding of what I experienced. So that the third step is intellectualize. The fourth step is I do what is called contemplative reflection on that. So I now try to imbibe it. And then the 5th stage is what is called envisioned learning. Okay, so that is where I become experienced, that it becomes envision imbibing for me. So only when I've gone to this imbibing stage would I have reached a brain circuitry which makes me in a stage of unconscious known. Okay, so this is how our learning happens, and we do it all these steps may happen simultaneously, may happen over time or something, but we go through this process is what enhances the brain. It's not just about, like, right now I'm talking, you learned a line. It is not imbibing. It is just probably first step. You are just getting exposed. Now we have to work on it for the next steps to make it an imbibe thing. I hope this makes sense.
If I may just add a 6th point to what Dr. Krishna said, I think sleep is also very important in the learning process. You know, we try to gain a lot of knowledge, but if the sleep pattern or of the sleep that we have is not of good quality, the brain does not get enough time to repair itself, to replicate what we have learned during the night. You know, it repeats itself at a very fast pace during the night. And there are different kinds of sleep. It's not just, you know, the regular sleep during the night. You know, the afternoon nap, or the yoga nidra, or, you know, the short meditation. All those things are very important to improve our learning process.
So let me tell you, sleep is very important because, see, whatever you get exposed during the day, whatever new things you learn, go into what is called short-term memory. So it goes to intermediate-term memory, right? And if you don't sleep that day, that night well, whatever new things you learned would be lost, because then at night is where this intermediate memory gets into permanent memory. So it's very important that we have a nice sleep. I'm not talking of length, because now there's new research which is saying that so far we're saying 8 hours and all that. Need not be. The length is not important. The quality is important. So, and things like meditation also are a deep level of relaxation, which is why they do much more wonders than just normal sleep.
Is it okay to have Jack ask his question?
Am I next?
Jack is actually next.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Okay, so this question is for Dr. Mehta. I'm wondering, Can fluid intelligence be improved through learning or training programs that focus on working memory and executive control? So there's fluid intelligence and there's crystallized intelligence, right? So when I say fluid intelligence, it's referring to the basic processes of reasoning, as opposed to crystallized intelligence that's learned procedure and knowledge. So yeah, I know for this discussion has come up, and I'm just curious, like what the latest research is or what your understanding is in terms of whether fluid intelligence can be improved through learning or training programs.
Yes. My short answer is yes. Fluid intelligence, or what is called cognitive malleability, yes, can be improved through learning. Of course,
Okay,
proper learning.
Yeah, I was about to ask, maybe you're about to answer. So what would be some examples that we could, learning type of examples that we could do in terms of fluid intelligence? Is there specific, training programs that you'd recommend or learning approaches you'd recommend in terms of increasing fluid intelligence, or is fluid intelligence is naturally increased by just general learning?
No, there have to be specific trainings based on specific requirements or specific modalities of learning that you have for yourself.
Okay, is there any examples that you could talk to?
About fluid intelligence?
About specific programs that would increase fluid intelligence.
Okay, so yeah, I should not market, but yeah, we have some such programs where we do that. But anyways, that's a different story. But so see, what is fluid intelligence again? It's the ability to switch over from one line of thought to the other line of thought. Okay, so one simple way of doing that would be even learning or understanding humor. Okay, so there can be various ways. One is humor. Okay. Then there are also brain physiological techniques which will get you into that state of fluid intelligence where you can cross connect or become fluid in that sense. Okay, creativity training, all creativity trainings, not the conventional types where they teach you art and all that, but they are advanced, what is called idea creativity processes, which also help improve your fluid intelligence. I hope I answered you.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Am I next?
Yep, your turn, Ocean.
Okay, so first of all, I'm so thankful that Garrett is doing this, and we have so far covered. I mean, on the surface, but we have so far covered so many topics are extremely important. I think we can spend each word, each concept for another 5 hours. But anyways, I agree with almost everything we have people have talked about. And I want to add, for example, Garrett said there are useful knowledge and unuseful knowledge. Remembering 50 number of pies is not useful. I totally agree. It's like my old roommate watching TV 8 hours a day, quiz television program, and he thinks he's getting smarter. I don't think he's getting smarter by learning all those things. Anyways, we so far we touched about conscious learning, subconscious learning, and well, my addition is learning is nothing other than association in your brain, and I think I want to putting a spotlight on the subconscious learning. I think that both Krishna and Himash talked about it, but it's extremely, extremely dangerously important. We shouldn't underestimate the power of persuading ourselves or other people through subconsciously. Advertisers spend trillions of dollars, inserting subconscious messages so people will buy their products. And politicians use it. Tony Robbins talks about the neuro-linguistic program. That's a part of it. It's a form of very sophisticated persuasion or make them learn certain things, and it's a form of controlling other people. Well, many of us own dogs, you know, and unless the dog is very special, we have to teach them to behave in certain acceptable civil ways. You know, don't bark, and you know, sit. You know, make them sit or make them anything. That's how our dogs learn. It's association. Okay. Now, you know, so advertisers and uses a lot of you know, NLP or a subtle or a subconscious persuasion or learning process to basically manipulate in controlling the masses. So, and a lot of politicians use it, you know, successfully, you know, and Hitler used it, and many politicians use. So we have to never underestimate the incredible power of subconscious learning or subconscious persuasion through symbolism. When we see the flag of swastika, Nazi swastika, it instantly invokes certain emotions, certain visions. Or when we see the American flag, it instantly, without bypassing your conscious understanding, instantly invokes certain emotions, certain visions, certain ethics, and so forth. So I think that's even more powerful than conscious learning. We say our subconscious is 10 or 1,000 times stronger than our conscious learning. And unfortunately, most of us are victim of other people's sophisticated and very manipulative programming. And many of us are unknowingly enslaved by their agendas. So we have to be really careful about, and we have to study more of what the nature of a subconscious learning or subconscious persuasion through a lot of sophisticated means. Thank you very much.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, very well brought out. Subconscious, the power of the subconscious, as they call it, right? So here you are talking of learning, I guess, for our own selves. We're not talking of how people can misuse learning also. So as I told you, 11 million bits of information per second, of which we are only aware of 54, right? But so therefore that what is happening to the rest, that the rest which is going in is actually used in processing our desires, our thoughts, our beliefs, and so on and so forth. And therefore, if you know how to put thoughts into your subconscious, one of which is what advertising does, repeats a thought in a few seconds, 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. Okay, so that is where they use emotional tags and lots of ways of doing it, right? So yes, when we talk of subconscious learning, whatever goes into your subconscious, it becomes you, in the sense that it now is going to drive your behavior. And so there is this very, very, very important thing, that it can become dangerous if you don't know how to use your subconscious. And therefore, we also have to understand what is subconscious, what is in our subconscious. We need to reprogram our subconscious or not get affected by so-called advertising or persuasive things and all that. But then our brains are so developed that, you know, even the person who knows about persuasive and all that, who's talking about persuasive things, would get persuaded. So but yeah, so I agree that subconscious, what is called impinging the thoughts into your mind or creating imprints in your mind, is a dangerous, and we have to be cautious about it.
Namaste.
Himanshu, if you don't have any other comments, I'm going to let Joseph ask his question.
Sure. All I want to add is thoughts have energy. Thoughts are not just random thoughts. They carry certain energy, and if there is willpower behind those thoughts, they can change the masses. This is why great leaders have a lot of followers. It's one single thought that can create a French Revolution. So understand the power of thought. And advertising is different because they reach the basal nature of humans, and that's the power, because everybody can be influenced through their basal nature. But at a higher level, when you talk about leaders, who have created revolutions, leaders who have changed the country, leaders who have won elections on the merit of their capability and their virtues, have some inner strength. So it's not just learning, it's also creating your own inner strength, your own willpower, and you attach that willpower with your thoughts. And when you communicate with that authority of your willpower, it makes a big change in the world. And that is how you make changes. So, it's one thing to just know a lot of things, to read a lot of books, but then if you really want to make a change in yourself and people around you, you need to build your own inner strength.
Hey, yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Himash. I forgot to mention one thing. I agree with everything you have said, except one thing. I used to be a big advocate of intuition, like you have advocating, but since the advent of the Google Map, and I'm a professional concert musician, and I drive all the time, and to get to the venues, 50 miles away, 100 miles away, and I tested, out of open-mindedness, and but I used to trust my intuition, and I used to try to just follow the shortest way through the Google Map, because they can read every single second. They can the shortest route to get to the venue as quickly as possible. And the Google Map beats my intuition every single time. So. I have more faith in Google Map than my intuition when it comes to reaching to the certain point in time and space. But just wanted to mention. But thank you. I agree with everything else.
Ocean, I'm a big fan of GPSs, but they've also steered me in very much the wrong way in places that I knew where I was going. So they're very
sometimes they fail.
Yeah,
sometimes they fail too.
But that's not intuition, right? That's reason and our own ability to know more than sometimes the GPS knows. Although sometimes it turns out I'm wrong, and the GPS knew about a closed road that I didn't.
Right.
For what it's worth. That said, Ellis raised her hand, and I think she has a good point, which is that we're at 8:30, and we want to ask people who haven't spoken to speak up. And I think Aisha is one of them and has her hand up. Joseph, I don't remember if you've spoken. Have you already spoken before?
I have.
Okay, so let's let other folks go first, and then we'll come back.
First, okay.
If you don't mind, Aisha, we want to let people who haven't spoken go first. So go ahead.
I love all of this. I just start off by saying I'm an educator, and so nerding out on learning process and how the brain works and how the brain learns is really fascinating. I had a few things jotted down. I really appreciate that someone brought in, Ocean, I think it was you talking about advertising, and you really focused on, I think one of the biggest connections in advertising, what advertisers figured out, is to appeal to emotions. When you get someone to feel something, that limbic system. And I think that's where one of the presenters was talking about the baser something. Yeah, basal. Go ahead.
Yeah, basal nature.
Yeah. Is that what you mean? But that kind of limbic, where like there's no frontal cortex, we're not critically thinking or rationalizing, we're just reacting.
Animal part. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The lizard brain, they say, right? Yeah. And it's really fascinating. I got my degree in media studies, which was really fascinating to learn about. And then I was not prepared to have any kind of job after that. But something about communication history is, if you look in the early 1900s, advertising appealed more to our frontal cortex, right? There was like lots of texts, and they talked about, rhetoric was really important. So they talked about, what is it? The three, logos, pathos, ethos. And it was really focused on having an expert and explaining the science of it. And if you look at how advertising, at least in our country, has evolved over the last 100 years, they've really figured out which is the kind of quickest way to not just get us to feel something and buy something, but to to, you know, we were talking about how thoughts and beliefs are really the core of every action and everything that we do. And so all of a sudden you're hooked in. Yeah, anyway, I was just thinking about that. But I was really, someone mentioned kind of two things. One, I'm curious about this thoughts as energy, because I think from the very little that I know, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm wondering if that what like scientific studies, if any, are looking at the looking at that in a more kind of quantitative way, and not just qualitative. And then the second thing was I've come across neurolinguistic processing. I think that the NPL, and I know I've
Neurolinguistic program. Yeah, Anthony Robbins was the famous figure.
Yeah, I don't really know what that is, and I wasn't really sure. Yeah, so I you know, somebody wanted to explain that to me, and I'm interested. Those two things.
Dr. Krishnesh, do you want to answer first?
I think first question was to you, so you go ahead.
Yeah, so I can answer the advertising part. I've been in the advertising business, so I'm, you know, charged as guilty. You know, what I would say is I totally agree with you. And you know, coming to the learning part, you know, of humans, advertising reduces the attention span. You know, we have ads continuously, like going one after another on the TV. So we are focused on one ad, and by the time we have heard about the ad, and suddenly there is a change of scenery, change of voice, change of jingle, change of music, environment, everything. So, you know, one after another, we are just, our mind is focusing on so many things. Likewise, if you look at a web page and there are ads, it's a distraction in multiple directions. So all that reduces your attention span. Even like I would say, even browsing the Instagram wall is a distraction, and it hinders your learning abilities, because you are watching one picture in a sunny environment. The next picture is in a rainy environment with more red colors. The other one is blue colors. You are changing the scenery, you are changing the colors, you're changing people, you're changing compositions of pictures, you are getting attracted to what's written. So it's constantly, so your mind is constantly switching back and forth in different locations, and this continuously reduces your attention span. So when you really get down to reading some book or trying to learn something which is much deep, much important for you, people get bored and distracted, because our mind has practiced distraction. Our mind needs to practice focus. But if whatever you do more, your mind becomes habituated with that. So when you have practiced distraction so much, it's really difficult to practice focus.
Can I ask a follow-up question before, I'm so sorry, before we, because I really love that you're talking about attention span anymore. I've always kind of thought of attention span as a limited resource. Like there's only so much to go around. And I was diagnosed a few years ago with ADHD. And when I think back to being a kid, I used to be able to like read for like 6 hours as a kid and no problem. I didn't have any attention issues when I was younger. And I feel like, you know, the diagnoses to me is less maybe brain chemistry or et cetera, and more kind of how my brain is mapped out and how it works now. But I wonder if there are, what studies have been shown or what studies have been done to see the link between the tech communication that we use and how it operates and how it's shaped and functions and how we interact with it, and how that affects a lot of us who really are challenged with attention issues, and not just, oh, you know, I'm doing this, I'm distracted easily or something. Like one of the symptoms of ADHD is that you do 95% of a task, and then that last leg of the task is really hard to do. Yeah, so I'm just kind of
Sure.
curious.
So if I may attempt to answer you, and since you are, an educator, I would say, there are studies in this area and the ADHD, but even like, in this particular discussion that we are having, there are these small windows of each one of us, and even that is distracting. We are talking about a very serious topic, but our eyes are constantly moving left and right, top and bottom, and that is a distraction. There are studies on distance learning or virtual learning using Zoom kind of platforms, and people have found just this distraction of the eyes um, reduces our ability to learn, reduces our ability to focus. Then the other distraction, on the Zoom platform that we have, we are talking to the camera, but we are also watching ourselves. So our own reflection in Zoom also reduces our ability to focus. And there are some, Dr. Krishnesh can talk about how it affects the brain, but there are scientific studies about when you look at yourself and your other people, it reduces your attention span and it causes distraction. But, there are ways in which you can focus, and, you can help as an educator. There are exercises that you can do with your kids to help them focus. And one of the very simple exercise is to create have a target drawn on a paper, and you put that in front of your eyes and allow people to focus on the target. Basically just make a vertical line and a horizontal line and a circle, and have people focus in the center of that circle before they do anything. So when your eyes are focusing on something, and then you switch to learning, so you'll be able to focus on what you're doing. So your attention span could be improved. With ADHD patients, what I have read about is, there are more sophisticated exercises that could be done, where it's not just looking at a target, but changing the distance of the target between you and the viewer. So the target is close to you, and then you keep moving it further at a distance. So you see the perspective, and you adjust your eyes to short-term vision and long-term vision, and that practice would help you focus. But I would let Dr. Krishnesh talk more from a scientific point of view and any studies that are done in this.
Garrett, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, like, using my intuition, I would like sort of observe that the ADHD diagnoses are increasing drastically at the same time that social media is, giving us smaller and shorter bites of attention. And I don't think that's just causation. I don't think that's just correlation. I think it's causation. And so I would argue that ADHD can actually be combated, and you can consciously make an effort to increase your attention span and ability to focus by practicing it and by reducing the amount of exposure to social media that decides to give you really short snippets of information and tiny bite-sized pieces that immediately focus you on the next most important thing that's just so much more important than the last thing you looked at, and yet the next one is so much more important than that. And unfortunately, that those tiny sound bites also go for like as mainstream as the nightly news, which is doing the exact same thing to us. If you look at the nightly news today and you look at it 20 years ago, you'll find it is drastically different and not better. Not everything is improving in the world, and I would argue that our attention spans are, right, wrong, or indifferent, consciously or unconsciously, being shortened based on the direction that a lot of our media consumption is going in. And I think we need to consciously be aware of that and consciously combat it so that we don't lose our attention spans, because that's not an ideal outcome, in my opinion. So
what I think is really interesting is that when I was first diagnosed, I asked several doctors, what outside of medication, what are things that I can do to help myself combat this? And this is something that, at least the symptoms that they have listed under ADHD are actions that I've had since college. So I've been dealing with it for a long time. But there was no answer, and for my kids, middle school ELA, the shortest attention spans, I do like the Pomodoro technique. And they were like, why are we doing this? And I was like, because I do it at home and that's how I get my dishes done. And that's how I clean my house. So, but I wish that there was more conscientiousness. I think that, and I wonder if the doctors would agree that mindfulness and meditation also are ways to combat maybe what we call ADHD is often what I feel is really information overload. That there's, I'm an introvert, extrovert, introvert. And so it takes me a long time to process information, and I like to do it deeply. And a lot of times I just get so like, I can't scroll Instagram. I can't scroll, I can scroll TikTok admittedly, but that's something else. But like Facebook and Insta, I can't, because it's, I go into rabbit holes and I'm like 2 posts in. So sorry. Anyway.
Good comment.
Dr. Mehta, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or should we let other folks go?
I think, yeah, because I think there are more questions coming up. I think she had a question on thought energy and all that, which I could answer. There are studies on that. So, so basically, see, if you see that our brains produce EEG patterns, right? There is electromagnetic fields created, and therefore there is energy. So I'm just hinting because it will be a long answer. So I'm just saying there are studies on that. As simple as that. I'll keep it short. And one more thing I would like to add is, if you know, ADHD can be used positively also. That's a controversial thing, but you can use it positively also, in the sense that your ability to shift attention, and if you just add little focus to it with little training, then you are a smartest person than the others, because then they can just get stuck with one thing only. So from the brain point of view, it's great, but if only you know how to use it. Okay, so I'll move on for others to talk.
Is there anyone that hasn't spoken that wants to speak up? Because we're at 8:45, so we'd love to hear from anyone.
I think that Katie, there's Ellis and Joseph. So
yeah, I agree with you on the information overload with Facebook also, because you might also be wanting to keep up with everybody as a supposed friend, and that's just going to spread your attention out too thin. I definitely felt a little bit overwhelmed when Facebook came out. I felt like, wow, the world's changing away from who I am. Like, because you can't just, you're suddenly like in contact with all these people instead of just setting aside like a whole afternoon to sit with a friend and they have to make a phone call, which is very different. But my original point was, in another group, we're learning about like the flow state, where like the optimal level of challenge and learning. So I'm wondering, when you're overwhelmed, like there's, an overwhelming amount of connections, what's happening there? Is it like you're not making because you're trying to form these new connections, new neural pathways, and yet you're feeling overwhelmed, like your challenge is too much. So I'm curious more from a brain perspective.
the brain does not get overwhelmed. It is our mental thought of exposure to overload which creates the overwhelmingness. Okay, so there is nothing overwhelming for the brain. It's just that so for example, our bodies can work continuously for 7 days and nights. But because I've done so much of it, we went through this session, it was too long, it was this thing. So we get bored, we get tired. It is a brain thing or a mind thing, not a real brain thing. So so most of the times overwhelmingness is because we think we have overloaded ourselves.
Got it.
Because our brain is capable of. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Good one. Good point. Fantastic point.
Sorry, I didn't know, Lisa, if you were intending to comment or if you were in background, so I muted you.
Sorry, Garrett.
I wasn't sure if Lisa was talking. It sounded like she was talking to someone else. I wasn't sure though.
Yeah.
Lisa, if you were meaning to comment, you can unmute yourself, but I just muted you just in case you were talking to someone else.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I couldn't tell.
Hi, it's Alice.
Yes,
In our chat, I put contact information and information on Himanshu and Dr. Mehta, and our upcoming events and contact information also for FTI.
Great. Thanks, Alice.
And now would be a good time to raise your hand if anyone has questions. We're
I
quarter to
think
now.
Joseph had a question, so we can, if somebody.
No, my question was actually just based kind of the same question that Katie had, where this idea of flow, there's this on the y-axis, there's this one graphic that has challenges, and on the x-axis it has skill sets, and it kind of comes to this ideal kind of sweet spot where you're not overwhelmed but you're not bored, and so that you're actually challenged and you're kind of growing and your confidence is growing with that. So it was somewhat similar to the same question that Katie was asking, where again, you don't have anxiety about what you're learning, you don't feel overwhelmed, and again, you're not bored. But is this sweet spot? Is there a sweet spot for learning, for taking in information and being able to integrate it, and then it sounds like that it's our minds don't get overwhelmed, it's our beliefs that our minds are overwhelmed is the bigger problem.
I agree that it's actually the minds which get overwhelmed. Our brains are capable, and therefore, you're talking about the sweet spot. I think before learning, we should get to that learning sweet spot, how to get there. Okay, and that is also a training that we can train our brains to have, because I mean, you might have in school or wherever, we learn through lectures and talks and all that, right? So many times, if the talks are boring, if the teachers are not making things interesting, then our brains learn that these things are boring, so we stop learning, because it's so basically, and I also have this theory that the topics that you like today are because the teachers who taught you in the beginning those topics, so in school, were really good. Okay, so it's how we got that information in, how learning was introduced to us. Was it as a force? Was it as a joy? Was it so that also? So if it is done with joy, with pleasure, with fun, then it makes a lot of difference. And I must say that our education system, no matter how much innovation we are bringing into it, we are still not getting to these kinds of teachings, and that's the problem.
If I may add,
go ahead, and I'll go after you.
The education system we have today is a mass education system, which means it's one lecture or one curriculum for 100 students in a class. And there are very difference in the way people grasp information, how they are attentive, what is the level of difficulty. So to get into the flow state, as Joe's asked, the information or the knowledge needs to be pitched to the right level of difficulty, and that is not happening. To do that, the education needs to be more customized, and online education could be a good way to do this, where who the student is, what the skill set is, you track that skill set, and then gradually raise the level of difficulty so that they can bear that level, they don't get overwhelmed. And there is a reward system, and there is a concept of not regular rewards but random rewards. So if you reward in an online experience, I'm an online experience designer by profession, so the gamification of education is really important, but it should not be immediately after you complete the task. Sometimes you don't give a reward, sometimes you give a reward, so that randomness also creates curiosity and anticipation. So, there is a lot to be done in how we do the education today. Sorry, Garrett, you can call upon
Okay. So I actually gave a talk on how to achieve your life goals in a state of flow, and I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot summary, which is first, focus on a goal that's really important to you. Second, remove all distractions, and I talk about a bunch of techniques for doing that. And then third, break the goal down into bite-sized pieces so that you can focus on the first one, and it needs to be a small enough size that you can make meaningful progress in the sequential period of time that you can allocate to it. If you do all of those things, then I think you'll find that you will naturally go into and remain in a state of flow while you're doing that. At least I spend most of my day in flow, quite frankly. Like I'm a workaholic. I work, over 80 hours a week, every week, usually over 100, but I'm happy when I'm working because I do all those things, and I'm just like very happy as a person that's working a ridiculous amount of time. So the other thing, as far as like people are mentioning anxiety, like I have a little saying that I try to share with people that I use to help them combat anxiety, which is do your best and accept the rest. If you do your best, you don't have to worry about anything because you did your best. And so if you just do your best and don't worry and accept whatever comes, like you'll be happy.
Yeah, Jack just mentioned in the chat, there is also a dangerous aspect to flow and can cause burnout. Yeah, the goal should not be in the state of flow all the time. You do need ebb and flow. That's the nature of life. We need to learn from nature, how nature progresses. Even when we breathe, we have a breathe in and breathe out. Likewise, there should be a pattern to the flow. You need to relax, consume, relax, consume.
Yeah, and I think there maybe we're using different definitions of flow, Jack. I'm curious why you think flow would lead to burnout, because like I said, I work ridiculous, hours, but I burn out every quarter and I have to take a half a day off of work and then I'm good to go for another quarter. So, and that's been consistent for the last 4 years that I've been working over 80 hours, or probably last 6 years that I've been working over 80 hours a week, every week. So, I don't think that flow causes me to burn out. I think actually, like, I burn out less often than when I wasn't working this much, simply because I have a better methodology. And so for me, flow actually keeps me functioning really in a healthy way. I would argue that if you're burning out from flow, it's not really flow. You're burning out from stressing yourself out and from worrying too much and from biting off things that are too big to tackle at one time, and from not falling into a state of flow. I would argue if you're burning out, it's because you're not in flow, not that you're burning out because of flow. But I'm curious, Jack, like why you feel like maybe I'm misunderstanding something. That's just my take and my interpretation from my experience.
So I understand what you're saying, but in terms of flow, like the person who coined the term flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, wrote a book called Flow, and in there he's got a number of different chapters where he talks about the possibility of people burning out if you're in for too long. I think the ideal would be to, and it's going to be you might be the exception. I'm talking about in terms of just the flow for most humans. You wouldn't want to go like say 10 hours a day every day for even like 5 days a week in the flow state is going to it's going to Dr. Mehta was talking about the brain doesn't get overwhelmed. I don't know. Get overwhelmed if you're in a flow state for too long a period. Again, you might be the exception, so that might be the case. But from what I've read from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who coined the term research and flow regarding flow, as well as some others in the field, there is that danger doubt from flow.
Yeah, maybe I'm not afraid to disagree with him, even if he coined the term. And again, it's from my experience. I haven't done a study on it, but I would argue that if someone's burning out from it, it's more likely not from being in flow too much, But that's just my take. You know, I think it would be interesting to do a study on people that get into a state of flow for long periods, and do they burn out more or less often than people who are not in a state of flow. But I don't think, like, even if he coined the term, I don't think he's done a study like that, unless you know of one, in which case I would love to read it.
I don't know one off, but I will definitely look back on my book. You know, as a couple other people in this group had already mentioned about another meetup that book flow. I was also in that group, and I think somebody linked the videos before. Yeah, I could look back for you. Absolutely.
Cool.
If I
Yeah, I
can
would
find
love
it,
to hear.
I'll send it to meetup.
Awesome, thank you.
Garrett, I think Will wants to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Thank you. Well, just on that, I thought flow was, for what it's worth, I thought flow was the opposite to burnout. And by definition, you couldn't burn out if you were in flow. But it's an interesting discussion. And I was just going to say, with ADHD, that I think it can be a little bit over demonized, ADHD, that this is just my theory, that perhaps there are evolutionary reasons. It used to be called, let's say that child, and I was one, is hyperactive. And there could be very good reasons for that. And we need this sort of, you know, we're not all the same. Like, you know, you have race horses and you have draft horses. A racehorse is very flighty and spontaneous, perhaps, whereas a draft horse, for the analogy of the equine species, the draft horse is slow and methodical and plods along, and you can't turn one into the other. So this is an interesting thing with hereditable traits as well. And I think we can overprescribe ADHD and say, oh, this kid needs to be on Ritalin straight away, whereas perhaps there could be evolutionary selection forces that have selected for ADHD. I've got it to a degree, but so I find it very hard to focus, but I'm also aware of about 8 things at once. As someone said, one of the doctors said earlier, you know, it can be a virtue if you can control it. So I think it's about managing it, and it can be a lot of creativity and productivity can come out of ADHD. So perhaps we just over demonize it to some degree. Thanks.
Sure, and I just want to wind things down. If anyone has last minute questions, feel free to raise your hand, but otherwise I kind of want to close things out because it is 9 o'clock and I've been up since, forget if it was 4 or 5 that I woke up today, but it was pretty early. Started interviewing people at 6. So it's been a long day. I just want to not see any hands go up. Thank Himanshu and Dr. Mehta for joining me in the roundtable discussion tonight, and thank everybody for their great questions. I guess, Himanshu and Dr. Mehta, do you guys have any sort of finishing comments that you want to leave people with?
I think I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. Thank you, Garrett, for organizing it. You know, we should do this more often.
Yeah, agreed. How about you, Dr.
Same
Mehta?
here. Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. Thank you all for nice questions. And just one last parting thought.
Yeah.
Don't give into so much over demonizing that a lot of people do about brains and all that. As Will mentioned very rightly, yeah, it's just how we use what we have. And if we are getting it, that means there is some science or some evolutionary reasons behind it. So don't get bogged down by things like ADHD and all that, okay, or overwhelmingness and all that. And basically learn how to use the brains, and I think we are on. Maybe we'll have some sessions later on, Garrett. But anyways, thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
I hope it was useful.
Agreed.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for the great conversation. Hope everybody has a great night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye. See you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.